This time I'm doing a video on the Vampire Covenant Strigoi bloodline. So I'm doing a video series for different bloodline armies in the Ninth Age. We're going through them one by one. I've had Lamia on the channel, I've done von Karstein, I've done the Brotherhood of the Dragon, we've done Nosferatu, and now we ended up with Strigoi. I must say Strigoi is the bloodline that I think is a bit less interesting, even though it's the one bloodline that I started to play when I got back into the Ninth Age. Just because it's quite easy to play, I think, because it's a bit of a push army. So you basically push forward your army, you see what it does, and hope for the best. Or at least that is one of the ways you can play Strigoi as. This particular list has still some options, but the options generally are a bit lower than with the other bloodlines, I would say. So it's the list of Julius Bansgo Castrain. I don't know how you pronounce it. Sorry, Julius. But he has a Vampire Count, General, Ghoul Lord, Dead Eyes, Bad Weapons, Kingslayer, Potion of Swiftness, Hypnotic Pendant, Strigoi Bloodline, Wizard Adept, and Shamanism. He has a Koche BSB with True Thirst, Banner of the Relentless Company, Strigoi, Wizard, Apprentice, Shamanism. Then he has a big block of ghouls, 2 blocks of zombies, 2 units of direwolves, a Dark Coach, 2 Spectral Hunters units, and 3 Vargheists. I think the way that the army has been set up is quite smart. The general and probably also the BSB as well, they both go into the big ghoul block to make a really decent, sturdy block that you can just push forward, and then that can deal with a lot of enemy threats. And then you have the ghouls. You have twice zombies for the scoring, because otherwise the list severely lacks any scoring units. You have 2 direwolf units to block up your enemy first turns of the game. You have the Dark Coach to provide a March bubble, because your ghouls are just gonna run away wherever they're needed. Then you have 2 mobile units of Spectral Hunters that can also cause terror. Well, they cause terror on the charge, so that's quite a nice aspect of Spectral Hunters. And then you have the 3 Vargheists. So with Strigoi, I think you either want to go with 3 Vargheists or with 2 Shrieking Horrors. Maybe you would want to mount your Vampire Count on a Shrieking Horror, but it seems a bit overkill from time to time. Yeah, let's first go through the character sections. So we have a Vampire Count and a Vampire Courtier. They're going to be the wizard users in the army. The army only has a wizard adept and a wizard apprentice, so it's definitely not strong on magic. And I think this is also where the true thirst on the Vampire Courtier comes into play. So you have Vargheists, you have Spectral Hunters, and you have Ghouls basically as your main bodies. And you have the Dark Coach. Well, everything in there. Well, the Vargheists and the Dark Coach both have Vampiricon 3+. Spectral Hunters, you're not really gonna raise back with a reanimation value of 1. So the ghouls are the only one that might benefit from reanimation, and True Thirst really solves the problem there. So you actually don't really have to take any Arise spell with this army. It can be a bit risky in terms of scoring. I don't know what Julius normally does. But I could imagine that he just completely forgoes Arise, and just hopes that his zombies will just survive. Because you try to put so much pressure on your opponent first turns of the game that it doesn't really matter. That the rest of your scoring in your list sucks quite a lot. Yeah, so the Vampire Count, why is he built in this way? First of all, the Strigoi bloodline gives your vampire Fortitude 4+ and Hatred and +1 health point. So the vampire count's gonna have 4 health points. He's gonna have Resilience 5, Fortitude 4+. He cannot take a mount except for a Shrieking Horror, which is fine, and you may not be equipped with any kind of armor at all. So that is quite a major difference from the other vampire bloodlines. You are replaced with Shamanism for your magic, and that's basically it. So the Ghoul Lord General, Ghoul Lord is the ancient blood power. It gives the unit poisoned attacks, and if you already had poison, then you wound on a natural successful. You wound automatically on a successful natural to hit roll of 1 less. So the ghouls normally they have poison on a 6+, they're gonna go to a 5 up poison, which is quite good to be honest. Then the Vampire Count himself, well, he has paired weapons, so he goes to 6 attacks. He has Kingslayer. I think this is really potent on this guy because you're just pushing forward a unit that is quite impressive in its damage output, and the only way for your opponent to really counter this unit is to put characters into your unit. Or you would have to play against Warriors of the Dark Gods, maybe with a lot of thunder stomping beasts like triple Feldrug Ancestor or a combination of other monsters. That might really be nasty. But then your poison from the ghouls also comes into play, where against high resilience pieces, normally if they don't have a lot of armor, so your ghouls should be able to deal with that. You have a potion of swiftness to make sure that you strike before there's one character in the game that has lethal strike and or flaming attacks and just kills your ghoul all in one go. You have the Hypnotic Pendant. This gives you parry, and no, it doesn't give you parry. It gives you Distracting, but the standard height rank and file models in your unit gain parry. So you have a defensive 7 model with Distracting. So a lot of stuff is only going to hit you on 5+, and a lot of rank and file is going to hit you on 6+. So it really builds into this the no armor deal. It's a bit of a compensation for not being able to take armor. You can also put it on another vampire bloodline model, but you don't benefit as much because parry is mostly just useful on ghouls, because skeletons already are gonna have parry from their hand weapon shield. If you go for halberds or for spears, then well, you are gonna raise so much that you don't really care about some extra skeletons dropping. If you want to put it on a character that goes in barrow guard, then yeah, you're gonna go for great weapons or halberds on the barrow guard. Then you probably are gonna play Lamia, and then you're gonna have them with defensive 6. So then parry is not that useful. So the just paying 100 points to get distracting on your vampire is quite expensive. But for Strigoi, it really makes sense. You have a wizard adept because well, you want the magic everywhere you want in this list basically. And then you have a vampire called Che BSB. He rounds up your magic, so you are gonna only have Awaken the Beast, Swarm of Insects, Chilling Howl, and the last shamanism spell, which I'm forgetting at the moment. It's not going to be Break the Spirit because that's the number 6, I believe, and it's not going to be Totemic Summon because that's the number 5. So you're going to have a very limited option of spells, and you're also not really going to want to 5-dice any spells because both of your characters are quite important to your list. The Vampire Coach is the BSB. He has True Thirst, so with 4 attacks, with Hatred, luckily, at Strength 5, Strength 6 because of True Thirst. You are going to get Vampire 3+ on this Vampire Core J. That's a nice bonus, but you mostly do it to be able to regain your ghouls that you lose in the process. The Banner of the Relentless Company is quite an interesting pick here because it increases the maneuverability of your list. It combines really well with the fact that you have blood ties with your ghouls and you can get Vanguard on your ghouls, so you can go for a first turn 12-inch move and then a 15-inch march afterwards, giving you a 27-inch move before the enemy even gets to respond to that. And that includes any Strigoi characters in your ghoul unit. I think it's a really good character setup for the army. Yeah, and then let's move on to the rest of the army. So we'll continue with the core. The core is going to be 35 ghouls with Vanguard and Champion, twice the zombies and twice direwolves. I don't know if maybe in this list I would have gone for skeletons instead of zombies. Well, you want the direwolves in there basically to block up your opponent. but to have a little bit more sturdy scoring could be nice. You could also have swapped out the Spectral Hunters for some Black Knights, because they do have scoring and they still perform quite well, I would say. They perform, at least in my opinion, better than I always um, envisioned them to do. I never expect anything from Black Knights, and then they still perform quite well for a unit of 6. Um, yeah, so we have the ghouls with the Vanguard. The characters are going to go in there. They also get Vanguard. Because Strigoi vampires joined to the unit, they gain Vanguard. He didn't take a max unit of ghouls, so I don't have any experience since 2 years or so with the full unit of ghouls. So I don't know if 35 is the way to go, or these 5 little um, leftover models are going to make the difference. And the funny thing about ghouls is that they gain Swift Reform with a champion, and with True Thirst, you're going to re-raise the champion all the time, so it doesn't really matter if your champion gets struck down. Um, yeah, and ghouls they perform quite well against anything that doesn't have any armor. Once your target does have armor, it's becoming a little bit more complicated, and shamanism doesn't really solve that. So one of the weaknesses of Strigoi in general is armor. I think that's also why the Spectral Hunters are on the list. To just give some counter against and armor, together with the Vargheists, of course. Yeah, so 2 attacks each. They're gonna be running Horde probably to get some extra attacks. Likely you are gonna be striking at the same time, maybe even before your enemy with Agility 4. If you go on charge, then you're gonna go to Agility 5. You'll strike at the same time as a lot of Elven units. And with 2 attacks in the profile, if you run them 8 wide, you're gonna have 16 attacks from the front rank, -4 from the 2 characters, so that's 12, +1 from the champion, 13. You'll have another 2 ranks, so that's another 16 attacks that you can add to that, so that's 29 attacks. With poison on a 5+, and in the later rounds, you're gonna be able to reroll to wound, to hit actually, because of your own early appetite. And the reroll to hit is really beneficial on a unit with 5+ poison. Yeah, so it's a decent unit with a vampire count in there and the vampire coche. It is still a bit of a risk to just fully push it forward, because there is things that can take care of this brick of ghouls. But yeah, normally with Vampire Covenant, the advantage is also that you can take a charge and then re-raise in your own turn. With the limited amount of magic that this list has, I don't know. I mean, you could also still go for double Arise and Awaken the Beast to get Awaken the Beast and 2 Arises, but then the first turn of the game you're not going to do a lot. So I don't know. Magic wise, it's definitely not the strongest list. So that's the core. Then let's move over to the first part of the special section. So here we have the Dark Coach and we have the Spectral Hunters. The Dark Coach we talked about before already in the Karnstein video. I think quite important in this list is that it gives the March bubble, giving the Spectral Hunters the possibility to march when the general is obviously going to march away from the rest of the list. And then the Spectral Hunters can be left out, but still be able to march with the Dark Coach. Yeah, Spectral Hunters, they're a bit of a funky unit. So I did play with a big unit of Spectral Hunters myself. I can't say that I was disappointed, but I also can't really say that I was impressed by them. Mostly because of the great weapon. So you will strike last. You only have an Aegis 3 up against non-magical attacks, so it feels a bit like medium cavalry. But you have defensive 3, everything's gonna hit you. You have resilience 3, everything's gonna wound you, and you have a 3 up Aegis. Well, basically it's a unit of 2 up armor save knights, except everything already has AP1 against you. but well, it's not going to be more than AP1, unless you have a character, an opposing character that you have to deal with. Then the unit really gets not that good anymore. Yeah, they do cause terror, so that is quite useful on them. But I must say that I still have to find some situations where it was really important for me to have an opponent run off the board due to terror, and it also being successful. Offensively, they do have to attack siege at strength 5 because of the great weapon with AP 10. They are really good at removing enemy armored units. Because normally knights they rely on their armor. They don't have that much damage output generally. So a unit of 10 of these, you can run them up as wide as you want because you have light troops. That is another beneficial aspect. So in the end, you will get probably at least 10 attacks back. That hit on 4 plus, that wound on 3 plus, maybe even 2 plus, probably. So you will do like 3 or 4 wounds on a knight unit. It's not too bad, but I mean, they're definitely. I was more impressed with them on paper than I was with them on the field, actually. But then again, just to synergize with the rest of the list, you need something that is mobile, that's quick. It's basically a toss-up between Black Knights and Spectral Hunters, I think. And Spectral Hunters do have the advantage that they are way more killy against armor, because they have double the attacks than the Black Knights. They have AP10 instead of Lethal Strike. Sure, Lethal Strike is also AP10, but it only triggers on a 6. Probably the Spectral Hunters are the more killy ones, and the Black Knights, well, I mean, if you're fighting something with Strength 5 AP1 or AP2, then actually the Spectral Hunters are more survivable, probably, than the Black Knights. And they're more mobile, that's for sure. But then again, Black Knights, they have scoring. So, I don't know. The main promise of the list basically comes with the Vargheists. So the Vargheists, we haven't talked about them before because they're quite interesting pieces. I would definitely consider them in independent lists and in Strigoi lists like this because well they have Vanguard and that changes a lot of stuff. It might be a bit of a vague description, but just having a Varkalak on a flank can be a big problem for an opponent. And if you have 3 of them, like in this list, and you also push up the ghouls, then it suddenly becomes an entire army that is just crushing down on you. And with 5 attacks at offensive 5 with strength 6, not strength 5, strength 6, I'm always impressed by the strength on these guys. With hatred, you have quite a reliable piece that can deal quite a lot of damage. They only have 4 hit points, and that is always a bit of a letdown. They have defensive 5, which is really good. They have resilience 5, which is really good. They have a fortitude of 4 up, which is really good. If your opponent has flaming attacks, then it is going to feel like you are just paying points for something that you don't get a revenue out of. But yeah, they are really pieces to be respected. And yeah, the way that I normally use Falcalax is that I use one of them, and then I like to not deploy everything in one go. And then the Varkalag is something that you can still use to respond to your opponent before he gets his first turn, because you have the deployment of the Varkalag, but you also have still the Vanguard. And Vanguard on a piece as potent as a Varkalag, that is quite rare in the game, actually. So normally it's like fast cavalry units that have Vanguard. I can't think from the top of my head about any monster or any other hard-hitting unit that has Vanguard. But Varkalags definitely are really hard-hitting for having Vanguard. So suddenly you have a piece that can respond to the enemy deployment quite effectively. Because with Vanguard you can also just Vanguard up to be hiding behind the terrain piece and then threaten the opponent with just having a march rate of 16 inches so you can pop out from behind your terrain piece into the backfield of your opponent's army. And then charge the next turn into one of his war machines. Because you have an advance of 8, you have Swift Stride because you're a beast. You don't have Fly, so it's going to be easier to chaff you. But your opponent has to respect the fact that you still have a monster that has a small base, actually, that can march 16 inches and threaten the backlines of your army. In addition, just like the Dark Coach, this beast has Vampire 3+, with Hatred with 5 attacks, at offense 5, strength 6. You are quite guaranteed to get a wound in, so even though it only seems like you have 4 wounds, once you have taken 1 or 2 wounds, you're going to be quite hard to shift still. Your opponent really has to take away the Vargheists in one go, because otherwise you're just going to loop into an endless round of restoration, basically. Yeah, so that is the entire list. The 3 Vargheists in this list, they enable you, together with the ghouls, to just push basically about 2,500 points of stuff in your opponent's face. That really wants to do some combat. You have the Dark Coach to march up a little bit behind. It's not going to be too far behind, because it could still do a turn to charge if your opponent is quite eager, because you can walk up 8 inches and you have an 8-inch advance, you have Swift Stride, so a 16-inch charge is still doable with a Dark Coach. You have the Spectral Hunters that can also march up, so depending on the matchup, you will have roughly everything basically, except for the zombies and the dire wolves. Well, the dire wolves are going to block you up first turn, so everything except for the zombies will be in your face in turn 1, and that is going to be the main power of this build. So basically, it's a push list that will do really, really well against gunlines, probably, just because it's too much for your opponent to handle. Against dedicated combat lists with some redirectors, I don't know. Single Vargheists can be dealt with quite easily in isolation, usually. If they're really close together, then it might be a bit more difficult. So the issue starts to come when you cannot put your opponent under enough pressure that he cannot react to you, basically. So if your opponent has charge ranges that outrange you, basically, then you're not in a really good position, because then your opponent suddenly can charge your Vargheists individually. He can charge your Spectral Hunters with stuff that he wants to charge with. And he can basically dismantle your entire army except for the ghouls that he can probably block off in some way or another. And then it's going to be just a mop-up of first the support pieces, then the ghouls. And, well, ghouls, they are quite tough, but against an entire enemy army, they're not gonna hold out that long. I have seen things just go through ghouls, like a big unit of ghouls in one go. So it is definitely possible. Yeah, this is going to be the Strigoi video. Please let me know whether you liked it or not, and I will see you the next time.